3 days after the Battle of Seoul, a message arrived from the Vrelian High Command. They requested a ceasefire and negotiations. The entire galaxy watched to see how humanity would respond. Ambassador Su-Min Lee stood in what remained of her office on Unity Station. The battle had damaged even this neutral ground, though not badly. She looked at the Vrelian message and felt nothing. No triumph, no anger, just emptiness. What do you think they want? Her assistant asked. To negotiate, Su-Min said. They think because they're asking for peace, we'll be merciful. They think this can end with a treaty and some concessions. And can it? Su-Min looked up, her eyes hard. No. They burned that bridge when they killed New Busan. The meeting took place on a neutral station. Su-Min arrived with a security detail but no weapons. The Vrelian delegation was led by Supreme Commander Vrock himself. He looked diminished somehow. The confident warrior who had led 3,000 ships to Earth now looked old and tired. Ambassador Lee, Vrock said, attempting diplomacy. We come to discuss terms of peace. The battle was costly for both our peoples. Perhaps we can find a middle ground. Su-Min placed a datapad on the table. These are humanity's terms. Unconditional surrender. Complete disarmament of your military. War crime trials for everyone involved in the New Busan massacre. Reparations paid to the families of every victim. Vrock's face twisted in anger. That's not negotiation. That's humiliation. You're right, Su-Min said calmly. It is humiliation. The same humiliation you inflicted on my people when you hunted them through the streets and broadcast their deaths for entertainment. We're still a powerful empire. We still have resources, colonies, ships. Su-Min tapped the datapad, bringing up an image. It showed a massive weapon platform orbiting Earth. This is the Ragnarok engine. It's a planet killer. One shot can crack a world's crust and turn it into a lifeless rock. We built it after Kilos. She leaned forward. Right now, it's aimed at your homeworld. If you don't accept our terms, we'll fire it. Your entire species will be extinct within a week. The room fell silent. Vrock stared at the image, his face going pale under his scales. You're bluffing. You don't have the power source for such a weapon. We focused the sun's energy into a weapon beam during the battle, Su-Min said. Did that look like we lack power sources? She stood up. You have 1 hour to decide. Surrender, or we destroy your world. After she left, Vrock sat alone with his advisors. They argued. Some said to refuse and die with honor. Others said the humans were bluffing. But Vrock had seen what humans could do. He had watched them turn physics itself into a weapon. He believed they would do exactly what they promised. 53 minutes later, the Vrelian Empire surrendered unconditionally. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light. The Vrelians, one of the most powerful military species, had been beaten and humiliated by humans. Species that had dismissed humanity for 30 years suddenly saw them in a new light. On Earth, there were celebrations in the streets. People who had feared for their lives now danced and cheered. Humanity had won. They had faced extinction and survived, but not everyone was celebrating. Captain Daewon Kim lay in a hospital bed, recovering from his injuries. The Battle of Seoul had nearly killed him. Doctors said he was lucky to be alive. He didn't feel lucky. He felt broken. Dr. Hannah Park visited him. She looked as tired as he felt. They sat in silence for a while. Two people who had created terrible weapons and used them to win a war. I submitted my resignation, Hannah said finally. I can't do this anymore. I can't build weapons. What will you do? Help rebuild. There are colonies that were damaged. Families that need support. I want to use science to heal instead of harm. Daewon nodded slowly. I'm retiring too. The Admiral tried to talk me out of it. Said we need experienced commanders. But I can't lead people into battle anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see the ships I destroyed. The people I killed. We did what we had to do, Hannah said softly, did we? Or did we become the monsters we were fighting? They didn't have an answer. Lieutenant Taeyang Choi was promoted to captain. At 25, he was the youngest ship captain in the human fleet. He took command of the Retribution, which had been repaired and refitted. He stood on the bridge looking at the same screens Daewon had looked at and felt the weight of responsibility. He had proven himself in battle, but battle had changed him. The eager young officer who had wanted to prove himself was gone. In his place was someone harder, colder, more careful. Captain, his new tactical officer said, we have incoming message from Earth Command. They want us to patrol the border sectors. Acknowledged, Taeyang replied. Set course. As the retribution moved away from Earth, Taeyang thought about the future. The war was over, but its effects would last for generations. Humanity had shown the galaxy their strength, but at a cost. They had weapons now that could destroy worlds. The question was whether they would have the wisdom to use them responsibly. The Galactic Coalition sent an official delegation to Earth. They came bearing apologies and a remarkable offer. They wanted humanity to join the High Council as a permanent member with veto power over all major decisions. Ambassador Su-Min Lee met with them in Geneva, in a conference room overlooking the lake. The coalition representatives looked uncomfortable. These were the same beings who had dismissed humanity and ignored the massacre at New Busan. Ambassador Lee, the coalition leader, began. We recognize that mistakes were made. We should have acted when the Vrelians attacked your colony. We hope that humanity will accept our apology and rejoin the coalition in this new elevated position. Su-Min was quiet for a long moment. Why now? Why offer us power now when you refused us basic protection before? Because the balance of power has shifted. Because humanity has proven itself. Because we need your voice at the table. You mean you're afraid of us, Su-Min said bluntly. You saw what we did to the Vrelians, and you're scared we'll do the same to you if you don't bring us into the fold. The coalition leader didn't deny it. Perhaps, but fear can be the foundation of respect. We're offering you real power, a chance to shape galactic policy, Su-Min considered. Part of her wanted to refuse out of pride. But refusing wouldn't help humanity. Being on the High Council meant they could protect their interests and prevent future attacks. We accept, she said. But understand this. We're not joining to make friends. We're joining to make sure that what happened to New Busan never happens to anyone again. And if the Council fails to act when people need help, we'll act on our own. That's acceptable, the coalition leader said quickly. As the delegation left, Su-Min looked out at the lake and wondered if she had made the right choice. Power was dangerous, especially when it came from fear. 6 months after the war ended, Captain Taeyang Choi stood before a gathering of new recruits at Earth's military academy. Thousands of young people had joined up after the war, wanting to defend humanity. He looked at their eager faces and saw himself a year ago. His speech was broadcast across the galaxy. Every species listened. The war taught us many things, Taeyang said. It taught us that we're stronger than we knew. It taught us that when pushed to the edge, we'll fight with everything we have. But it also taught us the cost of that strength. He paused, looking at the recruits. We lost thousands of people in the Battle of Sol. Brave men and women who gave their lives to protect Earth. We also killed thousands of Vrelians. Some of them were warriors who chose to fight, but some were just following orders. Some probably didn't even want to be there. War is not glorious. It's not heroic. It's necessary sometimes, but it's always terrible. The weapons we built, the tactics we used, they were effective, but they came at a cost to our souls. Taeyang's voice grew stronger. So here's what I want you to remember. Humanity will extend its hand in friendship to anyone who comes in peace. We'll trade, we'll cooperate, we'll build together. But if anyone threatens our people, our homes, our future, we will strike back with everything we have. Not because we're monsters, not because we enjoy violence, but because we're survivors, and because we never forget. The galaxy called us weak. They called us prey. They were wrong. We chose peace because we understood its value, not because we couldn't fight. And now the galaxy knows that. They know that humanity is not to be underestimated. They know that we protect our own. They know that if you cross the line, we will make you regret it. The speech ended with the recruits standing at attention. The broadcast went out across hundreds of worlds. Species that had ignored humanity now listened carefully. Species that had considered attacking human colonies reconsidered their plans. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer the weak newcomer to the galaxy. They were a power to be respected and, if necessary, feared. On Earth, construction continued on new defense stations. The Helios array was maintained and improved. The Ragnarok engine remained in orbit, a silent reminder of what humanity could do if pushed. But there were other projects too. Dr. Hannah Park led teams that were rebuilding colonies and helping refugees. Human traders spread across the galaxy, building economic ties. Diplomats worked to create alliances based on mutual respect rather than fear. The Vrelian Armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 3,000 warships, enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. Supreme Commander Vrock stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Deathbringer, and smiled. Earth hung in the distance like a blue jewel waiting to be crushed. "Send scouts forward," Vrock ordered. "Find their defenses and destroy them." 20 Vrelian scout ships rushed ahead. They expected to find desperate human fleets trying to form defensive lines. Instead, they found something strange. The system looked almost empty. A few scattered ships here and there, but nothing that could stop the armada. "It's a trap," Vrock's second-in-command said nervously. "Of course it's a trap," Vrock replied. "But we have 3,000 ships. What trap could possibly stop us? Move forward. Crush anything that stands in our way." The armada advanced deeper into the Sol system. They passed Neptune and Uranus without incident. The human ships they spotted fled before them. It seemed like humanity had given up. Then they reached the asteroid belt. The asteroids suddenly came alive. Hidden among the rocks were hundreds of railgun platforms. They fired simultaneously, hurling chunks of metal at incredible speeds. The railguns weren't sophisticated weapons. They were simple kinetic kill vehicles. But at the speeds they were moving, they didn't need to be sophisticated. The first wave of Vrelian ships took heavy damage. Shields meant to stop energy weapons were less effective against solid projectiles moving at a fraction of light speed. Several ships exploded. Others were crippled. "Return fire," Vrock shouted. "Destroy those platforms." Vrelian warships unleashed their weapons. The asteroid belt lit up with explosions. Railgun platforms were destroyed by the dozens. But there were hundreds more, scattered throughout millions of rocks. And the humans had chosen their positions well. The Vrelians had to expose themselves to shoot. Captain Dewan watched from the bridge of the Retribution, which was hidden behind a large asteroid. Around him, his crew worked quietly and efficiently. "Phase 1 is working," Lieutenant Taeyang reported. "They're taking damage and using up ammunition. Their formation is getting disrupted." "Good," Dewan said. "Wait for them to reach the Jupiter zone, then activate Phase 2. The Vrelian armada pushed through the asteroid belt. They had lost maybe 50 ships, but they still had overwhelming numbers. Vrock was angry at the casualties, but confident. The humans were just delaying the inevitable. Then they reached Jupiter. The gas giant's moons suddenly revealed themselves as massive drone carriers. Thousands of adaptive AI drones launched simultaneously, swarming toward the Vrelian fleet. These weren't the simple attack drones the Vrelians were used to. These learned and adapted. The first wave attacked in a standard pattern. The Vrelians destroyed most of them easily, but the second wave came in differently, having learned from the first wave's destruction. The third wave was even more unpredictable. By the fourth wave, the drones were coordinating in ways the Vrelians couldn't counter. "They're learning faster than we can adapt," Vrock's tactical officer reported. "Recommendation, retreat to regroup." "No," Vrock snarled. "We push forward. We still have them outnumbered." But the numbers were changing. The drones focused on engines and weapons, crippling ships rather than destroying them. Crippled ships got in the way of healthy ships. The Vrelian formation began to collapse into chaos. Dr. Hannah Park monitored the battle from a command station on Earth. She watched as her creations tore into the Vrelian fleet and felt sick. But she kept working. This was necessary. This was survival. "The Vrelians are heading toward Mars," she reported. "They're trying to split their forces, hit Earth and Mars simultaneously as planned." "Let them split," Admiral Kang said from her command center. "When they reach Mars, activate the Saturn group." The Vrelian fleet divided. Half continued toward Earth. The other half turned toward Mars. They thought they were being clever, forcing humanity to defend two worlds at once. The group heading toward Mars passed near Saturn's rings. The rings looked beautiful and harmless. They weren't. Hidden in the ice and rock were hundreds of cloaked hunter-killer ships. They had been waiting, silent and invisible. Now they struck. The human ships were smaller than Vrelian warships, but they were fast and deadly. They appeared out of nowhere, struck vital systems, and disappeared back into the rings. The Vrelians tried to pursue, but the rings were dangerous to navigate. Ships that went in too deep got caught by Saturn's gravity or hit by ice chunks. Lieutenant Taeyang had planned the ambush perfectly. The terrain favored the defenders. The Vrelians were powerful, but they were fighting blind. "Mars group is down to 800 ships," Taeyang reported. "But the Earth group still has over 1,500 and they're getting close." Daewon nodded. "Time to show them what we've really prepared." Earth began broadcasting on all frequencies. The signal was strange. a mix of sounds and data that seemed random, but it wasn't random. It was carefully designed to disrupt Vrelian neural interfaces. Vrelian warriors began to feel disoriented. Their connection to their ship systems wavered. Some experienced intense pain, others saw hallucinations. The psychological warfare protocols Dr. Hanna had mentioned were being deployed. But worse than the technical disruption was the content of the broadcasts. Humanity was showing the Vrelians footage of their own atrocities. Every civilian they had killed at New Busan, every cruel act, every moment of suffering they had caused. The Vrelians believed they were honorable warriors. Being forced to see themselves as murderers of innocents broke something in many of them. Some shut down, others became enraged and made mistakes. A few even turned on their own commanders. Vrock watched his fleet falling apart and felt fear for the first time in his life. How are they doing this? They're just prey. They're weak. But they weren't weak. They had just been patient. The Vrelian fleet reached Earth orbit, 1,500 warships against humanity's homeworld. They began to fire their weapons, aiming for cities and military bases. Then the sun itself seemed to attack. The Helios array activated. Dozens of satellites around the sun focused its energy into a massive beam. The beam was so bright it looked like a second sun being born. It swept across space and hit the Vrelian fleet. The first 100 ships caught in the beam simply vaporized. Their shields were designed for ship weapons, not for concentrated solar energy. The beam continued sweeping through the fleet, destroying everything it touched. Evasive maneuvers. Vrock screamed, "Get out of the beam's path!" But the beam moved too fast. And worse, it forced the Vrelian ships to scatter, breaking what remained of their formation. The human fleet, which had been hiding and waiting, now attacked. They hit the disorganized Vrelian ships from multiple angles. The adaptive drones coordinated with manned ships. The Ghostwalker units began boarding Vrelian vessels, sabotaging them from within. Captain Daewon led the Retribution into the heart of the battle. His ship shook as Vrelian weapons hit their shields. "Captain, shields at 40%, his engineering officer called out. "Maintain course," Daewon ordered. "Target their command ship." The Retribution fired everything it had at the Deathbringer. Other human ships joined in. The massive Vrelian flagship tried to turn its weapons on the small human vessel. But there were too many targets, too much chaos. A Vrelian plasma torpedo hit the Retribution directly. The ship shuddered. Alarms blared. "Hull breach on deck 7. Someone shouted. "Shields collapsing." Daewon was thrown from his chair as another hit rocked the ship. He pulled himself up, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Around him, crew members were injured or dead. "Lieutenant Choi," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Do you have firing control?" "Yes, sir," Taeyang replied, though he was holding his arm at an odd angle, clearly broken. "Then fire the null space mines. Full spread, target the remaining command ships." "Captain, that'll also hit some of our own ships," Taeyang said quietly. Daewon closed his eyes for a moment. This was the terrible choice of war. Sacrifice some to save many. He thought about the crew members who would die from his order. He thought about their families. But he also thought about Earth and all the billions of people depending on him. "I know," he said. "Do it anyway." Taeyang's face went pale, but he entered the commands. Null space mines deployed across the battlefield. Reality bent and twisted. Both Vrelian and human ships caught in the gravitational fields were crushed out of existence. But more Vrelian ships were destroyed than human. The tide of battle turned. Supreme Commander Vrock watched his fleet being annihilated and finally accepted the truth. They couldn't win this. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. Every planet, every moon, every piece of rock had been prepared for this battle. "Retreat," he said quietly. Then louder, "All ships, retreat. Fall back." But it was too late for most of them. The Helios array fired again. Human ships pursued the fleeing Vrelians. By the time the survivors reached the edge of the system, the Vrelian armada had been reduced to less than 400 ships. 3,000 had entered the Sol system. Fewer than 400 left. On the Retribution, Captain Daewon slumped in his chair. Around him, the bridge was a disaster. Smoke filled the air. Emergency lights flickered. He looked at the casualty reports and felt the weight of every death. The news of Kelos spread through the galaxy like fire. Every species heard about it. Every government watched the footage of Vrelian warships being crushed by forces they didn't understand. The humans, the weak prey species that everyone had dismissed, had just destroyed a major Vrelian military base. The Galactic Coalition called an emergency meeting. Ambassador Su Min Lee was not invited. She didn't care. She was done with the coalition. Instead, she sat in her office on Unity Station, watching reports come in from across the galaxy. Some species were outraged. They called humanity's weapons barbaric and cruel. They said humans had violated the laws of civilized warfare. Su Min almost laughed at that. The same species that had ignored the massacre of New Busan now wanted to lecture humans about civilized behavior. Other species were quietly recalculating their positions. Trade agreements were being reviewed. Military assessments were being updated. Some governments that had treated humanity with contempt were now sending private messages asking for meetings. Su Min ignored most of them, but two messages caught her attention. The first was from the Falcon Syndicate, a species of traders who controlled much of the galaxy's commerce. They were asking to meet privately. The second was from the Nephira Collective, an isolationist species that rarely spoke to anyone. They also wanted to talk. Interesting, Su Min said to herself. Meanwhile, in Vrelian space, the High Command was in chaos. The destruction of Kelos had shocked them. They had lost 15 warships and a major base to 4 small human vessels. It should have been impossible. The Vrelian Supreme Commander Vrok stood before his officers. He was the largest Vrelian alive, covered in black scales marked with red battle scars. He had never lost a battle in his 50 years of warfare. How did this happen? He demanded. His officers had no good answer. The humans had used weapons unlike anything they'd seen before. Weapons that bent space itself. Drones that learned and adapted. The Vrelians had no defense against such technology. Then we build defenses, Vrok snarled, and we mobilize the full armada. If the humans want war, we'll give them war. We'll burn Earth itself. Orders went out across the Vrelian Empire. 12 battle fleets began to mobilize. Each fleet contained hundreds of warships. Together, they could destroy entire star systems. The Vrelians would show humanity what real power looked like, but mobilizing such a force took time, and time was something the Vrelians no longer had. On the Retribution, Dr. Hannah Park sat in her laboratory staring at data screens. She should have felt victorious. They had won a major battle without losing a single human life, but all she felt was sick. She pulled up footage from the battle. She watched Vrelian ships crushed by null space mines. She saw how the gravitational forces had compressed metal and flesh into nothing. It had been quick, at least. The Vrelians had died in seconds, but that didn't make it easier. Second thoughts? A voice asked. Hannah turned to see Captain Daewon standing in the doorway. He looked tired. Lines had appeared on his face that hadn't been there a week ago. I designed these weapons as a deterrent, Hannah said quietly. I never thought we'd actually use them. And now I see what they do, and I wonder if we've gone too far. Daewon sat down beside her. I wonder the same thing. Every time I close my eyes, I see New Busan burning. And I see those Vrelian ships being destroyed. Both images haunt me. Then why do we keep fighting? Because if we stop now, New Busan meant nothing. Because if we show weakness, they'll come for Earth next. Because sometimes you have to do terrible things to protect the people you love. Hannah nodded slowly. I just hope we can live with ourselves after this is over. Lieutenant Tae Yang entered the room carrying a data pad. His young face was serious. Captain, we've intercepted Vrelian communications. They're mobilizing their entire armada, 12 battle fleets. They're planning a strike on Earth and Mars simultaneously. Daewon stood quickly. When? Our intelligence says 72 hours. Maybe less. How many ships are we talking about? Over 3,000 Vrelian warships. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. The entire human fleet numbered maybe 800 ships. They were outnumbered nearly 4 to 1. And Vrelian ships were larger and more powerful than human vessels. We can't win this, Hannah whispered. We have to, Daewon said firmly. Get me a secure channel to Earth Command. We need to coordinate a defense. Over the next several hours, messages flew between human ships and Earth. Admiral Kang listened to all the reports, her face growing grimmer with each one. They want to hit us at home, she said finally. They want to break our will by destroying Earth. Can we stop them? Daewon asked. In a straight fight? No, but we're not going to fight straight. Admiral Kang smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. We're going to turn the Sol system into a trap. And when the Vrelians arrive, they'll find out that attacking Earth was the worst mistake they ever made. Ambassador Sumin met with the representatives from the Felcon Syndicate in a private room. The Felcon were small creatures, barely half the size of humans, but their eyes were sharp with intelligence. Ambassador Lee, the lead Felcon said in their clicking language, translated by computers, we wish to express our concern about recent events. Your concern is noted, Sumin said coolly. Though I noticed the coalition didn't express much concern when my people were being slaughtered. The Felcon shifted uncomfortably. Politics are complicated, but business is simple. We have information you might find valuable. What kind of information? Vrelian fleet movements, supply lines, weaknesses in their formations. The Falcon leaned forward. We're traders, Ambassador. We know that this war will reshape the galaxy. We want to be on the winning side. And you think we'll win? After Kalos? Yes. The Vrelians are powerful, but they're predictable. You humans are not. That makes you dangerous. Sumin considered this. What do you want in return? Favorable trade agreements when this is over. Access to some of your technology. Nothing military. Just commercial applications. It was a reasonable request, and the information could save lives. Sumin nodded. Agreed. Send your data to our fleet commanders. The meeting with the Nephara was stranger. They were energy beings, existing as fields of light and thought. They rarely spoke to other species and never got involved in wars. Why are you contacting us? Sumin asked. The Nephara's voice came as pure thought translated into words. Because we have seen this pattern before. Young species, pushed too far, unleashing forces they don't fully understand. It ends badly. Are you threatening us? Warning you. The weapons you've created are powerful, but power corrupts. The Vrelians started as a peaceful species once. Then they discovered their strength and began to worship it. Now they're monsters. Don't become what you fight, Sumin felt a chill. What do you suggest? Win your war. Protect your people. But remember mercy. Remember that even enemies can change. Don't let hatred consume you. The Nephara faded away, leaving Sumin alone with her thoughts. On Earth, preparations were underway. Every defense station was being armed. Every ship that could fly was being pressed into service. Scientists worked around the clock on new weapons and shields. In the asteroid belt, workers installed massive railguns. Around Jupiter's moons, drone carriers took up positions. Near Saturn, cloaked ships waited in the rings. And on Earth itself, a new weapon was being prepared. The Helios Array, a network of satellites that could focus the sun's energy into a directed beam. It had been designed as a power source. Now it would become a weapon. Dr. Hana received the technical specifications and felt her stomach drop. This could destabilize the sun, she told Admiral Kang over the communication channel. If we use it wrong, we could cause a solar flare that would sterilize Earth. Then we better use it right, Admiral Kang said. Because if we don't use it at all, the Vrelians will sterilize Earth anyway. Captain Daewon brought the Retribution back to Earth orbit. He looked down at the blue planet below and felt a fierce protectiveness. This was home. This was what they were fighting for. Captain, Lieutenant Tae Yang said quietly, do you really think we can win? Daewon was silent for a long moment. I think we're going to try. And I think the Vrelians are going to regret ever crossing humanity. Across the galaxy, species watched and waited. Some hoped the Vrelians would crush humanity and restore the old order. Others secretly hoped the humans would win and shake up the corrupt coalition. And in the darkness between stars, the Vrelian armada was coming. 3,000 warships moving toward Earth like a wave of death. The countdown had begun. Captain Daewon stood in the war room deep inside the Retribution. Around him were his senior officers and Dr. Hana Park. The room was quiet except for the hum of computers. On the main screen was a direct link to Earth Command. Admiral Jiwon Kang appeared on screen. She was 70 years old and had spent 50 of those years in the military. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and cold. Captain Kim, she said, what I'm about to show you has been kept secret since we joined the coalition. We never trusted them. We knew that one day someone would test us. We prepared for that day. The screen changed to show blueprints and technical data. Daewon leaned forward, his eyes widening as he read. Beside him, Lieutenant Tae Yang made a small sound of surprise. Dr. Hana covered her mouth with her hand. These weapons, Daewon said slowly, Some of these violate coalition treaties. We're not in the coalition anymore, Admiral Kang said flatly. And those treaties only applied because we signed them. The Vrelians never cared about treaties, neither did most of the other species. They just wanted to keep us weak. She leaned forward. Captain, I want you to understand something. We built these weapons hoping we'd never use them. But the Vrelians killed our people. They broadcast it like a game. They need to learn that humanity is not prey. The Admiral's image disappeared, replaced by more technical data. Dr. Hana stepped forward, her scientist mind already working through the information. Null space mines, she read aloud. They collapse local spacetime, creating temporary black holes. She looked up at Daewon. Captain, these weapons are incredibly dangerous, not just to the enemy, to us, to space itself. Can you deploy them? Daewon asked. Hana hesitated, then nodded. Yes. I helped design them 5 years ago. I never thought they'd actually be built. Lieutenant Tae Yang pulled up another file. Adaptive AI fleets, self-learning drone swarms that evolve their tactics in real time. They study the enemy and change their behavior to counter any defense. He looked excited despite the grim situation. This is incredible technology. What else? Daewon asked. Psychological warfare protocols. Tae Yang continued. We can broadcast directly into Vrelian ships, show them footage of their own atrocities. Studies show it breaks their warrior mentality. They believe they're honorable. When forced to see what they really are, many become unstable. And this, Hana said quietly, pulling up a final file. The Ghost Walkers, enhanced soldiers with experimental cybernetics. They can board enemy ships without being detected. Neural implants let them think faster, move faster. Nanotechnology makes them nearly invisible to sensors. Daewon looked at all the data surrounding him. Weapons that could tear holes in reality, machines that thought and learned, soldiers more machine than human. This was the arsenal humanity had built in secret. How many other ships know about this? He asked. Every human military vessel received the data 1 hour ago. Admiral Kang's voice came through the speakers. We're coordinating with all fleet commanders. Your orders, Captain Kim, are to strike first. Show the Vrelians what we're capable of. Make them afraid. Daewon took a deep breath. Understood, Admiral. What's our target? The Kelos system. It's the Vrelian forward base. They use it to launch raids into neutral space. Intelligence says there are 15 Vrelian warships there, along with supply stations and repair facilities. Destroy it all. After the communication ended, Daewon gathered his bridge crew. He explained what they would be doing. Some looked scared, others looked eager, all of them looked determined. I won't lie to you, Daewon said. This is going to be brutal. The weapons we're about to use, some people will say they're too cruel, too dangerous. But remember, Nubusan. Remember why we're doing this. Sir, one of the younger officers spoke up. What if we become like them? What if we turn into monsters? It was Dr. Hana who answered. Then we stop. After this war, we put these weapons away and never use them again. But right now, our people need us to be strong. They need us to show the galaxy that humans are not victims. The Retribution jumped to hyperspace, heading toward the Kalos system. They weren't alone. 3 other human ships traveled with them, each carrying the new weapons. It was a small force compared to the Vrelian fleet, but they had surprise on their side. Lieutenant Tae Yang worked on the battle plan. His plan was clever and ruthless. The human ships would appear to attack, then retreat when the Vrelians engaged. The Vrelians would chase them thinking humans were running away, but the retreat would lead them directly into a field of null space mines. They'll think we're cowards, Tae Yang explained. Their culture values aggressive pursuit. They won't be able to resist chasing us. And when they hit the mines? Daewon asked. Space-time collapses. The mines create gravitational forces strong enough to crush their ships. It'll look like space itself is eating them. The plan was set. The ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kelos system. Immediately, Vrelian sensors detected them. The alien ships powered up their weapons and began moving to intercept. Day-Wan watched his screen as 15 massive Vrelian warships turned toward them. Each one was twice the size of the Retribution. Their weapons could punch through human shields in seconds. In a straight fight, the humans would lose badly, but this wasn't going to be a straight fight. Deploy the mines along trajectory Beta, Day-Wan ordered. Stealth mode. I don't want them seeing anything until it's too late. Small drones launched from the human ships, each carrying a null space mine. They scattered through space, invisible to Vrelian sensors, and waited. Open a communication channel to the Vrelian commander, Day-Wan said. The screen showed a large Vrelian, his scales dark red, his eyes yellow and cold. He smiled when he saw Day-Wan. A human ship, the Vrelian said in a rough voice. Come to die for your colony? We enjoyed killing them. They screamed so sweetly. Day-Wan felt rage burn in his chest, but he kept his face calm. I wanted you to see something before you die. I wanted you to know that humanity remembers, and humanity does not forgive. The Vrelian laughed. Big words from prey. Let me show you what happens to prey that challenges predators. The Vrelian ship surged forward at full speed. The human vessels turned and ran, just as planned. The Vrelians roared with laughter across their communication channels, mocking the fleeing humans. They're following the trajectory, Taoyang reported. 30 seconds to minefield. Day-Wan counted down silently. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. 5. Activate the mines. In the darkness of space, reality bent. The null space mines activated all at once, creating dozens of gravitational anomalies. Space twisted and folded. The Vrelian ships traveling at high speed had no time to react. The first ship hit a mine and simply stopped existing. The gravitational forces crushed it into a point smaller than an atom in half a second. The second ship managed to fire its engines in reverse, but it only slowed its death by a few moments. The third ship tried to turn and smashed into a gravitational wave, breaking apart like a toy. In less than a minute, 12 of the 15 Vrelian warships were destroyed. The remaining 3 desperately tried to escape, but the human ships were already moving to intercept. Drones swarmed around them, cutting off their escape routes. Day-Wan opened the channel to the surviving Vrelian ships. This is Captain Day-Wan Kim of the UES Retribution. Surrender or die. The Vrelians refused. They would rather die than surrender to prey. So the human ships gave them what they wanted. The adaptive AI drones learned from the Vrelians' defensive maneuvers and adjusted their attacks. Within minutes, the last 3 ships were drifting hulks. Then the human ships turned their weapons on the Vrelian base. The supply stations exploded. The repair facilities burned. Nothing was left alive. Day-Wan recorded a message and broadcast it on all Vrelian frequencies. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. This is Captain Day-Wan Kim of humanity. You attacked New Busan. You killed our people. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. This is just the beginning. Humanity is coming, and we will not stop until you pay for every life you took. The message spread across the galaxy within hours. Species that had ignored humanity suddenly paid attention. The Vrelians, for the first time in 300 years, felt fear. They crossed the line. Now humanity strikes back. Even harder, a HFY science. Fiction Story Outline Part 1, The Breaking Point, setting the year, is 2347. Humanity has been part of the Galactic Coalition for 30 years, but always as the weakest member. The galaxy views humans as soft, emotional, and physically inferior, useful only for their resourcefulness and stubborn persistence. Main characters introduced: Captain Day-Wan Kim, commander of the UES Retribution, a human military vessel, Dr. Hannah Park, chief scientist aboard the ship, specializing in quantum weapons research, Lieutenant Tae-Young Choi, tactical officer, young but brilliant strategist, Ambassador Soo-Min Lee, human representative to the Galactic Coalition, the inciting incident, the Vrelian Empire, a powerful warrior race that has always looked down on humanity, launches an unprovoked attack on the human colony of New Busan. They justify it as culling the weak and claim it's within their cultural rights. The coalition refuses to intervene, citing non-interference in member disputes. Over 200,000 human civilians are slaughtered. The Vrelians broadcast the massacre across the galaxy as entertainment. mocking humanity's weakness. Humanity's response, Ambassador Sumin Lee stands before the Galactic Council and delivers a chilling message. You've mistaken our restraint for weakness. That ends today. The coalition laughs it off, until humanity withdraws from the organization entirely and issues a declaration of war against the Vrelian Empire. Part 2. The Arsenal Unveiled. The Revelation. What the galaxy doesn't know is that humanity has been preparing for this moment since joining the coalition, distrusting the alien powers. Earth's government secretly poured resources into advanced weapons development, forbidden technologies, and strategic planning. Captain Daewon Kim receives orders directly from Earth Command. Show them what humans do when you cross the line. The Human Advantage Doctor. Hana Park unveils humanity's secret projects. Null space mines, weapons that collapse local space-time, creating temporary black holes, adaptive AI fleets, self-learning drone swarms that evolve tactics in real time, psychological warfare protocols, broadcasting the Vrelians' own atrocities back to their homeworld, breaking their warrior morale. The Ghostwalkers, stealth soldiers enhanced with experimental cybernetics who can board enemy ships undetected first. Strike Lieutenant Tae-Yang Choi plans a surgical strike on the Vrelian forward base in the Kelos system. Using tactics the galaxy has never seen, the human fleet appears to retreat, only to deploy null space mines that obliterate the entire base. The Vrelians suffer their first major defeat in 300 years. The galaxy watches in stunned silence. The message Captain Daewon broadcasts a message to the Vrelian High Command. You wanted to see what humans are capable of. This is just the beginning. Part 3. The galaxy reacts fear and doubt. The Galactic Coalition scrambles to respond. Some species express outrage at humanity's barbaric tactics. Others quietly recalculate their position on humans. The Vrelian Empire, enraged and humiliated, mobilizes its full armada, 12 battle fleets, each capable of sterilizing entire planets. Humanity stands alone. Ambassador Sumin Lee is contacted by several coalition species offering to mediate, but she refuses. You stood by when we were slaughtered. We'll stand alone now. Behind the scenes, a few species, the trade-oriented Felcon and the isolationist Nephara, quietly begin supplying humanity with intelligence on Vrelian fleet movements. Internal conflict not. All humans agree with the war's brutality. Dr. Hana Park struggles with the ethics of her creations, especially after seeing footage of Vrelian civilians caught in the crossfire of a null space mine. Captain Daewon must hold his crew together as some question whether humanity is becoming the monsters they're fighting. The turning point, Lieutenant Tae-Yang Choi decrypts Vrelian military communications and discovers their plan. A simultaneous strike on Earth and Mars, intended to break humanity's will. The human fleet has 72 hours to prevent the extinction of their species. Part 4. The Desperate Gambit. The trap is set. Captain Daewon and Lieutenant Tae-Yang devise a plan so audacious it borders on suicidal. They'll lure the Vrelian armada into the Sol system, but not to defend it. To ambush it. Using humanity's entire network of deep space stations and hidden weapons platforms, they'll turn the solar system itself into a weapon. The Battle of Sol, the Vrelian armada arrives expecting an easy victory. Instead, they find the asteroid belt weaponized with railgun arrays, Jupiter's moons hosting thousands of drone carriers, Saturn's rings hiding cloaked hunter-killer ships, and Earth itself, broadcasting a signal that disrupts Vrelian neural interfaces. Dr. Hana Park activates the Helios Array, a network of solar satellites that focuses the sun's energy into a directed energy beam. The battle is brutal. Humanity loses 60% of its fleet, but the Vrelian armada is annihilated. The cost, Captain Daewon is gravely injured when the Retribution takes a direct hit. Lieutenant Tae-Yang takes command and makes the final call to activate the Helios Array, knowing it will destroy several Vrelian ships still locked in combat with human vessels, sacrificing some of their own to ensure victory. The aftermath, surviving Vrelians retreat in chaos. Their empire, built on the myth of invincibility, begins to fracture. The galaxy watches in shock. Humanity didn't just survive, they won. Part 5. The New Order. The Surrender. The Vrelian High Command requests a ceasefire. They expect negotiation. Instead, Ambassador Su-Min Lee presents them with terms of unconditional surrender. When they refuse, she shows them footage of humanity's next weapon, a planet killer called the Ragnarok engine. Surrender, or we erase your homeworld. The Vrelians surrender. Rebuilding and reckoning, Captain Daewon recovers from his injuries, but retires from active service, haunted by the lives lost. Lieutenant Tae Yang is promoted to captain and takes command of the Retribution. Dr. Hana Park leads efforts to dismantle the most dangerous weapons, arguing that humanity must not become defined by its capacity for destruction. Galactic Shift, the Coalition offers humanity a seat on the High Council with full veto power. Ambassador Su-Min Lee accepts, but makes it clear that humanity will never again tolerate being seen as weak or expendable. Several other species, inspired by humanity's defiance, begin to challenge the old power structures of the Coalition. The warning. The story ends with Lieutenant Tae Yang addressing a gathering of new recruits at Earth's military academy. His speech is broadcast across the galaxy. They thought we were weak because we valued life. They mistook our kindness for cowardice. Let this be a lesson to the galaxy. Humanity will extend its hand in friendship. But if you cross the line, if you threaten our people, our home, our future, we will strike back harder than you can imagine. Not because we are monsters, but because we are survivors, and we never forget. Final scene, the camera pulls back to show Earth rebuilt and thriving, its orbital defenses now a symbol of both protection and warning. In the distance, human ships patrol the borders of the solar system, watchful, ready, unyielding. The galaxy has learned. Never underestimate humanity. Themes. The danger of underestimating those who choose peace. The moral cost of survival and revenge unity in the face of extinction. The balance between mercy and strength, tone third-person narrative with a focus on military strategy, emotional depth, and the transformation of humanity from victims to victors. The story explores both the triumph and tragedy of war, showing that even justified violence comes with a heavy price. End of outline.